achieved.
So again, normally I kick off my show with some rant about mixed martial arts stuff, but I have an opportunity to talk about something that's happened to me personally, still related to the show. I've recently had some issues with YouTube. Concerning issues. My channel's been, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, has been demonetized, so I can't put ads on it, which, hey, it is what it is. It wasn't producing a lot of cash, but it was nice to get a couple $100 every couple of months to pour it in. They claimed it was because the tags I was using were misleading. I'm not sure if what they're referring to. I usually use tags related to the fighters in the card. I do talk about prelims because I mentioned how they're on my website, but whatever, they felt they were misleading. Fine, I really didn't have a big problem with it. But then I recently got another email, and they pulled down 2 of my videos. They pulled down my Ronda Rousey Amanda Nunes video from however was that 3 years ago, and they pulled down my another one, Damian Maia versus Kamaru Usman. They pulled down those 2 videos, stating that I was promoting violent and hurtful and dangerous activity, and so I looked at the guy and that I had not met with the guidelines, YouTube's community guidelines, and I looked at it and I'm like, well, basically they cited that I was promoting as in dangerous activity, which falls in the category of suggesting like people go out and attempt things that are dangerous or harmful, or undertaking in these tests or fads that are or challenges, if you will, and it just was concerning because I'm looking at going, this is what my entire channel is. But it's talking about a professional sport with 2 professional athletes going head-to-head and competing. That's all it is I talk about. My entire channel is that. YouTube is full of people who do the same thing. And it's also full of videos that depict it. I don't even show violence. I talk about competition. And yet here's YouTube pulling it down. So then, of course, I went through the appeal process, and I clicked on appeal, and I literally said, I kind of framed it as, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about as far as how I breach the community standards. Could you please elaborate on this? I feel these videos do exactly what they say they do and don't do what you're suggesting they do. Can you please elaborate? And the response I got back was, we've reviewed your videos and we're upholding our decision. And it's like, are you kidding? So whatever, I'll let it go. But now I'm fearful that going forward, YouTube could continue to pull down my videos. And it's just like, are you serious? Like, you're pulling this down, but yet you've got people, on here taking, eating, scorching hot peppers, and to the point where they throw up and cry and everything else, have to go to the hospital, and you see that on there, or any of these idiotic challenges. Just a number of things that are there that I think are more concerning than what I'm talking about. But either way, I definitely will continue to appeal these video issues in the event they continue to pop up. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we are breaking in the upcoming UFC Fight Night 153, which will transpire in Stockholm, Sweden, from the Ericsson Globe, June 1st. Now, because of the start time, it's a 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, so be aware of that. On this episode of the show, I'll be giving you all 6 of my main card predictions. I believe there'll be 7 preliminary fights. I'll be giving you predictions for all of those fights as well, so please check those out on my website, kamikazeoverdrive.net. Now, I'm coming off another fairly well put together show. I've started to turn a corner. I had an early slump to start 2019, but I feel like I'm finally starting to come out of it. If you look at my recent records, going back to UFC Fight Night 149, I went 8-3, 9-4, 9-3, had a little bit of dip at 7-5, then 9-4 the last one. And again, I had a solid bet pack. If you look at my bet packs for my hardcore betting cluster, my gold plays all cashed. I had Dos Anjos and Oliveira paired together, and I had Grant Dawson, Aspen Ladd paired together. They all cashed in. My top silver play is Felicia Spencer with the upset, and then if you go down to my bronze plays, I had Julio Arce and Vincente Luque paired together. Both of those guys who win by TKO, which paid out nicely as well. Now, unfortunately, my CBC, which again is a bigger risk, it's more for the casual bettor where I risk a little bit more. I had Dawson and Dos Anjos paired together with Oliveira by submission, Aspen Ladd by TKO. Obviously, Oliveira didn't get the submission victory, so that kind of shut those down. I didn't win anything else with those betting packs, but still, we're starting to turn the corner. We're starting to win and get some solid returns, and they're just $15. So it's just a helpful bit of information. You can augment your already completed personal research on the card. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions and subscribe to me on YouTube. Click the subscribe button, click the like button, hit that bell to make sure you get the notifications, all that other fun business that allows you to be notified when I post one of my videos. And I will point out, and I've done it again for this show, since I was having a lot of trouble predicting main events and I was on a streak or a significant slump, if you will, and you can see that on on my the sidebar on my website. You can see the wins and losses in that one column representing the main event. And I made a deviation. What I found I was doing was I was starting at the bottom of the main card and working my way up, doing the main event last. And by the time I got there, I was kind of a little bit rushed because I wanted to get to the recording aspect of it. I was a little bit drained because I've been watching research and preparing for all these fights, and it tended to be very late at night. And I thought, well, why don't I make an alteration and start doing it first? First fight I predict is the main event. And since then, I'm 3-0. That's solid. And we'll see if we continue that here with the Alexander Gustafsson Alex Smith. I almost said Andre Smith. Alex Smith. Anthony Smith main event. I don't know why I got confused there. But on that note, let's get to that first main card prediction. The first fight in the main card goes down in the UFC's featherweight division as Daniel Teymur, 6 wins and 3 losses, takes on the debuting Sun Bin Jo with a current record of 9 wins and no defeats. Now, Teymur is winless in the UFC. He is one of 3 fighters in the main card coming in this on a 3-fight losing skid, which is something a trend we've been tracking. We'll certainly talk about. He's actually lost back-to-back fights by submission, including to Fishgold, who's on this card, and Julio Arce, who we just saw fight. For Sung Bin Jo, as I said, he's undefeated. All 9 of his wins have come by finish. He is returning to action after a 15-month layoff, and he is debuting. He fought just once in 2018 and once in 2017. Prior to that, he had 4 fights in 2016. He made his debut back in 2014, so he's a relatively new guy. Physically, the South Korean fighter is 5'11". He's 6 inches taller than Teymur. He'll have just a 3-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger man by 4 years. Now, Teymur, it's worth noting he's fighting at home in Sweden. He's never fought there in the UFC. On the regional scene, he went 5-0 at home, so that's certainly an advantage and a level of comfort that he has. And please don't get his Daniel Teymur confused with his brother David Teymur, who's had a little more success in the UFC and fights at lightweight. When you look at Sun Bin Jo's record, he has 5 wins by knockout, 4 wins by submission, 6 finishes in the first round. He is coming off a round 4 TKO victory. And when you look at his last 3 opponents, they are combined 33 wins and 22 losses. One of those 3 guys sub 500, so not terrible records. Guys with some experience, not cans by any stretch of the imagination. Not top-level talent either, though. He does train alongside the Korean Zombie, which certainly helps out. There's not a ton of footage out there. There's some highlight reel footage. I couldn't track down a lot of his fights, but I did see enough, and I've done enough research to have a firm understanding of what he's capable of. The long layoff is concerning, and I said some lower-level competition, but he's been smashing those guys, and that's important. When you're fighting guys who aren't not that top level, getting them out of there is what you need to be seeing out of a fighter, finishing those guys and moving on to the next. Now, he does come from a kickboxing background. He's got good pop in his hands, and he's relatively aggressive on the feet. He will throw elbows in close and at range, standing back, and he'll work a solid tie clinch as well with some hard knee strikes when the opportunity strikes him, if you will. Now, for Teymur, he's very aggressive as well. He likes to exchange on the feet and throw down. But while he's aggressive and has some pop in his hands, he tends to fade. He has 3 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission. All 6 of his career victories have come in the opening frame. In the UFC, he's gone beyond the opening round in all three fights, and he's lost all of them. And I said he has power. He hurt Henry in his debut. He hurt him early in that matchup, but he faded and lost a decision. In this fight, he needs to push Joe early, make him question if he belongs at this level, make him feel out of sorts, off rhythm because of the layoff. For Teymur, he could try to go to the floor and mix it up a little bit. He does have a couple wins by submission, so does his opponent. But that would be a major deviation from his normal approach, which is certainly something I don't want to see. For a guy that already has bad cardio, I don't want to see you go outside of your norm, try and win with what brought you to the dance, and go from there. We could see a firefight early. Not sure Teymur has the ability to capitalize on a potential slowdown for a guy who's debuting and coming back off for a layoff. In fact, he could be the one who has that issue. All numbers suggest he will fade outside of the opening round as well. Joe is the taller man, which is huge. And he has a bit of a reach advantage, and that will certainly help him when they trade and exchange on the feet. I expect, again, an aggressive battle early on, and if Joe can't get him out of there in the early stages, I expect him to have more success later in the fight as Teymur slows down. Look for just the taller, longer guy to really lean on Teymur and use that clinch, use those knees to bring him up, and really do some damage in the later stages of the fight against a guy who's probably going to be against the cage and tired. And my prediction is Sung Bin Jo to defeat Daniel Teymur by TKO. Fight number 2 in the main card goes down in the UFC's lightweight division as Damir Hadzovic, 13-4-0, fighting out of Bosnia-Herzegovina, takes on the Spartan Christos Giagos with a current record of 16 wins and 6 losses. Now, Hadzovic started his UFC run with a 1-2 record, with that one win, a comeback third-round victory over Marcin Held that he was on the verge of starting. I guess it would put him 0-3 when everything was compiled. But he has now won back-to-back fights and 3 of his last 4 and found some momentum. For Giagos, he scored a decision victory over Mizuto Hirota last time out, which we got correctly, which is improved his overall UFC run over 2 separate stints to a combined record of 2 wins and 3 losses. Giagos will have a 1-inch reach advantage and a 1-inch height advantage, and he is the younger fighter by 4 years. Now, when you look at Christos, who he's fought in the UFC, he lost and was submitted against Charles Oliveira. He lost and was submitted by Gilbert Burns, and he lost a pretty good fight to Chris Wade. For Hadzovic, same thing. He's lost against decent competition. Mairbek Taizumov put him out of there pretty quickly in his debut, and Alan Patrick, who is a flawed fighter, but still brings some decent things to the cage, he lost to him as well. Now, there are 2 glaring noteworthy scenarios to point out here. Both of Giagos' wins have come when he's been able to get the better of his opponent on the mat. He had a submission victory, and he had a 5 takedown decision win. So 2 areas of concern, or 2 areas there that you see where he has success. For Hadzovic, his defeat against Alan Patrick came on the result of 9 takedowns. And his comeback win against Marcin Held saw him give up 4 takedowns before he eventually got the finish. For Giagos, he tends to win if he's successful on the floor. And for Hadzovic, his losses come against opponents that target ground-based attacks. So it's definitely something worth noting there. No, but Giagos has also been subbed twice in the UFC and has given up 7 takedowns over his combined 3 UFC defeats. He's actually been subbed 4 times overall as a professional. And for Hadzovic, we saw him utilize his wrestling much more effectively against Marco Polo Reyes last time out, a fight I got badly wrong. Taking him down, holding him, and doing a good job from top position, eventually finishing with ground and pound. So there's certainly suggestions that either one of these guys could find some success on the mat, and that could turn the fight in their favor. Now, Giagos came out very aggressive on his feet against Hirota, which tends to be his MO, and he brawled with him, but he combined it with his wrestling. That was a new thing we'd like to see. Versus Hadzovic, he needs to be very mindful of trading with a guy who's a very heavy hitter. Both guys have 7 wins by knockout, but I would give the edge in overall striking skill and power to Damir in this scenario here. Now, Hadzovic's counter wrestling could have improved. Again, he gave up 13 of the first 19 takedown attempts he faced. But over his last 2 fights, his opponents have attempted no takedowns, so he has not been tested. So in fact, it might not be any better. It's just the numbers are skewed because we haven't seen him faced with any takedowns. Now, against Reyes, when he went offensive, he did a nice job of timing his shot, and he was very effective riding with Marco Polo as he tried to stay on top, maintain that top control, do damage with his ground and pound, eventually got him out of there. Now, the thing with Christos Giagos, which is definitely worth noting, is he's known as a fighter who will fade. Both in fights overall and in rounds. He starts very quickly in fights. We saw against Hirota, he came out strong, and then he'll start to slow down and let the matchups get away from him. Against Hirota, certainly the 3rd round, he was slowing down. He had limited success with his offensive wrestling. His takedown attempts were prolonged and for the most part failed. And when they did separate, you saw those shoulders slumped and just a big deep breath and not a lot of offense, not a lot of snap. And while Hadzovic doesn't have a great track record in longer fights, he carries a very good pace, and I think he'll be able to push Christos in the early exchanges, which could add up if the fight goes longer. Hadzovic I think he's also the more likely fighter to find success with his wrestling than Giagos will with his striking. Giagos could absolutely win this fight on the basis of top control and takedowns against Damir's issues on the ground, questionable takedown defense, and for Hadzovic, he absolutely could stop Giagos on the feet. But if you flip those scenarios, I think Hadzovic's more likely to have success with wrestling than Giagos is with his striking. Now, Hadzovic can't let Giagos get started with his wrestling, can't let him get on top, but if he does, there is still the potential that Giagos is going to fade and in the round and in the fight, and Hadzovic will be able to take it over. Damir, I think he's going to find his stride early in the feet, showcase his continued offensive wrestling as his foe starts to slow down, get on top, and my prediction is Damir Hadzovic to defeat Christos Giagos by TKO. In the featherweight division, we feature Mr. Finland, Makwan Amirkhani with a record of 14-3-0, taking on Chris Fishgold with a very impressive 18-2-1 record. Now, this is a battle of European featherweights. Amirkhani is 4-1 in the UFC, which is a split decision loss to Arnold Allen, which I thought was controversial. But all of his victories in the UFC have come from fighters who have since been released. I believe none of them are on the roster still. So not a knock on him. He helped send them on their way, but still worth noting. For Fishgold, he lost his debut, I believe it was short notice. He lost his debut via TKO against Kelvin Cater. He is coming off a submission victory over fellow main Carter Daniel Teymur, and he has just a single loss in his last 10 fights. He has a draw mix in there as well, but still a very solid track record. Now, for Amirkhani, he comes into this 2 inches taller. He has a 4-inch reach advantage. Fishgold's the younger fighter by 4 years, and it's worth noting for Makwan, he's been out of action for a year, and he's fought just once a year in 2016, 2017, and 2018, so activity has certainly been an issue for the European fighter. Now, both fighters have sub-reliant records. Amirkhani, 9 of his 14 wins have come by submission. For Fishgold, 13 of 18. From a wrestling perspective, Amirkhani's landed 11 takedowns over his last 3 fights, and Fishgold's coming off a 5 takedown performance against Teymur, so very impressive on both fronts. Amirkhani at times has slowed down in fights. Against Arnold Allen, he started very strong in each round, but got outworked as the fight went. He did go to his wrestling against Jared Knight with some relative effectiveness to score points with those well-timed takedowns in close rounds, and it worked for him on the scorecards. The other thing I liked from Amirkhani in that matchup is he capitalized on the poor positioning of Knight. Knight would go for submissions, try to jump on his back, didn't get them, and more often than not, Makwan was able to adjust and get into the better position and make that exchange work in his favor. Now, it's also worth noting Fishgold fought Teymur. He came out looking for his wrestling early, and he didn't get him down, and then he got in trouble himself. He went to his back and lost position. At times, he was reaching for his takedowns in that fight, looking to grapple at all costs, went for a standing arm triangle, jumped to his opponent's back, and lost that position. And he was losing position more often than not, and against a guy Teymur, who's not known for his wrestling, is not known as a top-level grappler, that is concerning. And again, Knight was giving up position routinely against Amirkhani, and Makwan was making him pay. And if Fishgold does something similar, we're going to see Makwan and Amirkhani do the same thing. Survive that initial trade-off of maneuvers, and then ultimately wind up on top. Now, Fishgold is a good scrambler. He's constantly looking for submissions. He eventually caught one against Teymur to get the victory. But how does he fare against a much better grappler than his last opponent presented? Amirkhani is very capable on the mat, and we've also seen Teymur slow down, which tells us that Fishgold was able to kind of grind him out a little bit, weaken him, soften him up, and then get the finish. Now, Amirkhani's cardio isn't amazing, but I think he might have a slight edge here. Fishgold tends to slow down a little bit too. I also give Amirkhani the edge in striking. He's been working with SPG, I believe, over there, and looking like he's rounding things out. He looked to be landing some good strikes in his last matchup. He was landing some decent, more technically savvy offense with some good snap to it, and he should have an advantage with the reach, better control overall, and improving technique. Fishgold, again, a very good grappler, but I didn't care for his careless approach where he's just willing to go for anything. Maybe he'll clean that up against a guy who's more opportunistic, but ultimately in this matchup, look for Amirkhani to make him pay by controlling the position once he's on top, making those mistakes count and magnifying them. Look for Amirkhani to score on the feet while both guys will have, and with his striking, and I think both guys will have their moments of success on the mat. I think we'll see Makwan start to hold the better spots as the fight advances. Again, Amirkhani's cardio isn't great, and this is one of those matchups where we could really see it shift either way if somebody underperforms or gets tired, and it's going to be tight, but my prediction is Makwan Amirkhani to win by decision. Up next, we have the first of a trio of light heavyweight bouts on the main card. This one featuring the poster boy and 11th ranked Jimi Manuwa, 17-5-0, taking the Austrian-born 10-1 Aleksandar Rakic. Now, this is the second of 4 lightweight bouts on the card, but honestly, the last 3 fights, these are the most important. It's almost like an informal elimination tournament, where the 3 winners will take a step up, the losers will take a step back. They're still not out of it with the light heavyweight division being, not as deep as everyone expects it to be. But hey, the winners here certainly position themselves for a later opportunity. Jimi Manuwa comes into this matchup having lost 3 in a row and 4 of 6. He was knocked out by Thiago Santos, who's now fighting for the title. He was knocked out by Volkan Oezdemir, who both fought or lined themselves up for a title fight in their next fight. So he's kind of been a jumping stepping stone for guys looking to get in contention. For Aleksandar Rakic, he's 3-0 in the UFC. He's won 11 straight overall since a pro debut defeat, including decisions over Francis Barbosa and Justin Ledet, a dominant decision over Justin Ledet. And then he TKO'd Devin Clark, who's fighting in the prelims, in a very wild fight in his last matchup. Now, Rakic, we have varying reports on his height. Some have him at 6'4". The UFC officially has him at 6'6". I've been heard the UFC tends to round those numbers up. But either way, he's going to be 3 to 4, 5, maybe 5 inches taller than Manuwa. He should be the taller man. The reach is almost identical. In fact, Manuwa might have a slight 1-inch reach advantage depending on the reports I have seen. One thing we do know, Rakic is the younger man by 12 years. Now, a couple of scenarios are in play here. First, you get Jimi Manuwa. He has lost 3 fights in a row. We've already talked about Teymur on the card having lost 3 fights in a row, but there's a lot to be said for fighters that lose 3 in a row, especially the difference being here is Manuwa is at a much higher spot within the division and caliber of opponent and caliber of competition and his own caliber as a fighter than Teymur is. So this, I think, applies more to him. We have seen guys who have lost 3 in a row, their backs against the wall, they need to rally, they are very dangerous, they need a victory, and often they get overlooked because of those 3 losses, and they get that win, they snap the streak. Is that Jimi Manuwa here? Certainly worth noting. Now, on the flip side of things, we are in a time period where Jon Jones has come back, and we are looking for new title challengers. The UFC needs guys to stand across from Jones and contend. If he isn't moving up to heavyweight, we probably will get to see Jones Cormier at some point, but Jones is still young, and we're going to see guys want to fight him, and the UFC needs guys. Thiago Santos is next in line. You've got Dominic Reyes and Johnny Walker, who certainly could be the next after that, with Cormier mixed in somewhere in between. But Rakic isn't that far away. And in fact, if you go Cormier, and then you have Reyes and Walker and Rakic all come after Santos if Jon Jones emerges the title, that almost helps the UFC fill out their UFC light heavyweight title picture all the way to the end of 2020, even into 2021. That's what they're looking for here, and that's so that you could be looking at a fighter like Rakic where they're trying to promote him to a title contender spot, and getting him a big win over Manuwa would certainly do that. So 2 scenarios at work here. Now, when you look at Jimi Manuwa, you ask, what does he do well? He knocks guys the fuck out. That's what he does well. 15 of his 17 wins have come by knockout. He is 1-1 on the scorecards, and I believe he has 1 submission victory. So he's not coming in with a flying omoplata, if that's even possible. He's going to look to knock guys out. He's a good boxer. He works some decent knees and elbows in close. His kicks are decent. But his durability and cardio are major concerns. And his cardio has always been a problem with Manuwa. His durability has been magnified. His lack thereof has been magnified over the more recent outings. Again, Oezdemir knocked him out. Jan Blachowicz in a rematch wore him down in a decision, and then Thiago Santos kind of did both. He wore him out with torrid striking exchanges, and then eventually knocked him out. Now, for Rakic, he showed he can win prolonged fights. He had that dominant 3-round win over Justin Ledet. He is 4-0 outside of the opening round, and against Ledet, he landed 104 significant strikes. Those are numbers that tell you he can do things in a prolonged fight. He also has power. 8 of his 11 wins by knockout. He put Devin Clark down for his only UFC stoppage, but, big but here, Clark hurt him. He was close to finishing Aleksandar. If Clark can do it, it's hard to believe that Manuwa can't. Jimi has big-time power, and if he hits Aleksandar on the chin, he's probably going down. There's a very good chance he could go down. And it only takes one. We've seen multiple times with these heavier guys that one shot can turn a fight on its ear. That being said, the durability edge should still lie with the Austrian. But he needs... we need to go deeper than that, actually. The X factor actually could be Rakic's wrestling. Against Ledet, he landed 3 takedowns, and he showcased some solid top control and did a lot of damage, beat him up, and really discouraged Justin Ledet. And Ledet's a pretty decent grappler. Manuwa's not easy to take down, but he has given up takedowns in 2 straight fights and 4 of his last 6. So the combo of wrestling and striking volume could serve to exhaust Jimi, the poster boy. And, he still showed against Santos he's dangerous as he gets tired, but it's not an ideal scenario to have a guy like Aleksandar Rakic pushing you to a point you're not comfortable with. Manuwa's lost 3 in a row. Again, that makes him dangerous, but his window for victory in this fight is extremely limited. It's probably a knockout that needs to go down in the first half of the matchup. He's not going to win a decision against Rakic unless he hurts him in all 3 rounds. He's very likely to get stopped if they get trading shots and seeing whose durability holds up. And if his takedown defense doesn't hold up, he's going down that way too. Rakic is going to score more offense overall, and he's the more durable fighter, as I just mentioned. He will push Jimi early. Again, he needs to be mindful of not getting countered, getting smashed. Look for Manuwa to react and be scrambled and just be out of his comfort zone and eventually start to slow. And my prediction is Aleksandar Rakic should defeat Jimi Manuwa by TKO. We move to the co-main event of the evening, and it's the second of 3 consecutive light heavyweight fights that have a lot of title implications or potential contendership implications. In this matchup, the 7th-ranked former title challenger, no-time Volkan Oezdemir, 15-4-0, meets the legend, the sledgehammer, the 9th-ranked Ilir Latifi with a current record of 15 wins, 6 losses, and 1 no contest. Now, Oezdemir started his UFC run off with 3 consecutive victories to earn him a title shot against Daniel Cormier. He lost that in definitive fashion and has now, stumbled his way through a 3-fight losing skid. But the thing with Oezdemir, he has never lost to the current champion, Jon Jones. And 2 to 3 successful appearances and solid performances could warrant a return engagement with the champion, or at least with the new champion, and a shot at the title again for him. For Latifi, he's coming off a decision loss to Corey Anderson. He had won 2 in a row in 5 of 6. That loss to Anderson certainly took a big bite out of his potential opportunity to fight for a title in the not-too-distant future. Volkan is 4 inches taller than Latifi. He'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger man by 6 years. But again, Ilir is this hulking specimen who's just huge and built, very well built. So he could never go down to middleweight, I don't think, at least. More like have to go up to heavyweight and just throw bombs and not care what happens. Now, Volkan is arguably coming off his most complete performance, and it was a decision loss to Dominic Reyes. I had Reyes in that matchup, and I felt Oezdemir absolutely deserved the victory. I saw Reyes turning the fight in his favor, but again, I didn't feel he did it quick enough and did enough to really get that victory. But again, it ultimately went in my favor and against Volkan, so hey, it is what it is. But it was a decent performance for a guy not known for going deep in fights and having a lot of success. Now, Latifi's coming off, as I said, a difficult loss to Corey Anderson, where he just couldn't do enough to earn a decision, and that was concerning. Overall, Latifi 4-3 in decisions. He's 2-2 in the UFC, and with 5 of his 7 octagon victories coming by finish, and all 5 coming in the opening round. So you're starting to see the theme or the strand of that I'm working on here. Latifi has a very dangerous punching power. He hits hard, and he's got a power submission game. 5 wins by submission, 5 wins by knockout. He has various ways he can finish opponents should the opportunity present itself. Now, he's not a big volume guy. His best UFC performance came, as far as volume, 44 significant strikes against Tyson Pedro in a decision victory. He landed just 30 against Gian Villante, but he landed a trio of takedowns. And that's kind of been his MO. His 2 decision wins, those 2 ones I just talked about, have come over guys that are also notorious for slowing down and not doing enough as the fight progresses and struggling there. Now for Oezdemir, he's known for fast starts. 12 of his 16 wins by knockout, 11 of those 12 in the opening round, including Jimi Manuwa and Misha Serkinov. He hits very hard. He comes out very aggressively. He's throwing, looking to finish. He is 3-1 in decisions, but he has lost 4 of his last 6 fights to go outside of the opening round. So... And again, his win versus OSP came via decision, was a split decision, kind of controversially slowed down. It was his debut, and of course the Reyes loss, also very controversial and by split decision as well. And while, and when you look at what he did against Anthony Smith, Smith landed 77 significant strikes, Oezdemir landed 77 significant strikes against Anthony Smith and was ahead until he got finished. He looked good against Dominic Reyes, but he did slow down a little bit. So does he fit that profile of the typical fighter that Latifi can win in a decision? That's a great question here, and we'll have to figure that out. Now, versus Tyson Pedro, Latifi landed 44 significant strikes to 31, but he accompanied it with 4 takedowns. Similar totals against Villante, accompanied with 3 takedowns. So he needs to work his striking and takedowns in conjunction to grind out decisions. When you look at Volkan Oezdemir in his longer fights, 77 significant strikes against Smith, 82 against OSP. He only landed 35 against Reyes, needed to crank it up a little bit, didn't have the success he needed. His takedown defense has been solid. Cormier is the only guy that's taken him down so far. If he can stay vertical, it will take away one of Latifi's key abilities to score points. From a durability perspective, though, the edge lies significantly with Volkan. DC stopped with ground and pound based on his wrestling, based on a positional advantage. Ilir has been stopped 3 times overall. Ryan Bader and Jan Blachowicz. Blachowicz with a body kick. Bader with this kind of I think it was a knee. Was it a knee? I'm pretty sure it was a knee or a kick. Knocked him out cold. And Oezdemir absolutely has the power to do it again. Add to that total. I don't like the lack of volume that Ilir offers over a fight. And with no finish, it's hard for him to win based on solely on his striking. He will need his wrestling to work here. Look for Volkan to touch him up with the boxing. I was impressed with his boxing against a longer fighter in Reyes. Use his reach and height advantage to certainly back Latifi off. And I feel Ilir becomes a little bit gun-shy against a guy who's going to press the action and throw at him. I think Latifi's going to struggle with the single-note striking that he offers against a more capable boxer. Again, Volkan is one of those fighters on a 3-fight skid. I think it impacts the odds. It impacts the perception of what we're seeing out of him. I like jumping on guys in the spot. I know I didn't take Teymur. I know I didn't take Manuwa for a couple different reasons. But my prediction here is Volkan Oezdemir to defeat Ilir Latifi by knockout. And finally, we move to the main event of the evening, the final light heavyweight bout of the night, as the former multi-time title challenger, the Mauler Alexander Gustafsson, currently ranked number 2 in the division, 18-5-0, takes on recent title challenger Lionheart Anthony Smith, the current record of ranked 4th, and current record of 31 wins and 14 losses. Now, we are set for ultimately a draw in this matchup because both men are coming into this fight off of title fight losses, so they're both going to have terrible performances, and we're going to see a letdown on both sides, and no one will do anything. Post-title fight letdown scenario at its finest. Most likely not the scenario. Shocking if it was, though. Now, for Gus, he's coming off that loss to John Jones, losing by TKO, the title fight loss. It was a matchup for the vacant title at UFC 232. He had won back-to-back bouts against Glover Teixeira and Jan Blachowicz. For Smith, he lost at UFC 235 back in March. dropping a decision against Bones. He had won 3 in a row, stopping Rashad Evans, stopping Shogun Rua, and submitting the aforementioned Volkan Oezdemir. Physically, both guys are very big. Gus 6'5", Smith 6'4", 3-inch reach advantage for Gus. Smith is the younger man, but it's also worth that he's spent most of his time at middleweight, went up to kind of change his fortunes, and it worked out for him. And he's still there. I would say Gus physically is the larger man overall. Now, this is the 4th time we've seen Alexander Gustafsson headlining in Sweden in the UFC. He beat Thiago Silva. He beat Glover Teixeira. He had that massive letdown loss against Anthony Rumble Johnson in between. His only loss in 7 total fights at home. Now, Gus, he had against Jones, it was a bit of a disappointing performance. Big expectations after that first matchup. He was injured in this fight, and he got finished, and he got finished hard. Now, Smith, he didn't get finished by John Jones. That actually cost me a lot of money. I had Jones to finish him. But it's hard to say he had a better fight. He was rendered defensive for the majority of it, very lackluster. I like Anthony Smith. I followed him for a long time. He was hit with that illegal knee, and I give him credit because he could have said, no, I can't compete. He would have won the title by disqualification, set himself up for a rematch and a bigger payday, but he ultimately opted to keep going. So 100% props to Smith in that matchup based on that scenario. Now, when you look at what Smith did to get there, he put together a solid run to garner that first shot against Jones after the Gustafsson vacant title fight. But he had wins over a couple fading fighters in Shogun and Evans. Got him rolling, got some momentum. And then when he beat Oezdemir, he beat Volkan after Volkan faded. And again, I had Anthony Smith to win that matchup against Oezdemir. But he was able to endure the early struggles, get through them, and rally and win that fight. He did that in similar scenarios against Hector Lombard and Andrew Sanchez. Even when you go all the way back to Elvis Mutapchik, I'm probably saying that incorrectly, in middleweight, he lost the opening round and then rallied and took out Elvis in a comeback fashion, stopping him. Now, Smith is a very well-rounded fighter. He's capable in all areas, but he's starting to be one of these guys where he's either a dog in the fight or he's not in the fight at all. You know, he showed against John Jones that if he isn't better than you, and if you don't falter, he's in trouble. You know, he was losing against Oezdemir, getting beaten and getting beaten up by John Jones, and the difference was Jones never faded. Volkan did. Smith pounced, got the win. Jones never gave him an opening, and that was the difference. Gus is a very capable fighter that matches up with Lionheart very well. Gus has good wrestling, good footwork on the feet, power in his punches, his cardio solid, above average foot speed, everything. He does everything, fairly well. His only losses in his last 13 fights, twice to John Jones, once to DC, once to Rumble. Elite company. Does Smith fit that category? I guess we'll find out on Saturday. Smith, though, I think he's going to struggle with the speed and with the combination of speed and physicality that Gus offers, especially if Smith is looking to rally and counter. You do not want to let Gus pile up damage. Glover Teixeira is a tough son of a bitch, and Gustafsson beat him up and got him out of there. And Smith's a tough dude as well, and he might be able to endure it, but you do not want to let Gus get unloading and start getting confidence and hurting you. Unless Gustafsson has a major setback and the thought of losing another title fight really hampers his ability to perform, and he had a very poor camp, I don't anticipate him having... I think he's going to be amped up here. He's fighting at home again. It is what it is. He's been in this situation before, coming off a title fight loss, knowing he can get back there with some success. Look for a repeat performance. Win some fights and pretty much put the UFC in a position where they got to put it together again. I don't think he'll have a letdown here. Smith is the more likely fighter to have a letdown. He's had a long career, 45 fights for a young man his age. He reached the top and he struggled tremendously. He is more apt to struggle with that post-title fight scenario because he's never really experienced it before, especially at least at this level. He's also traveling to Europe, enemy territory, which can be very difficult for a fighter to overcome. Smith needs to make this fight ugly. He needs to brawl, look to catch Gustafsson, might open him up. That might open him up, and that might overextend himself. Smith, his cardio isn't amazing, and Gustafsson is a guy who can go. We know he can go. Ultimately, look for Gus to utilize his wrestling and top game to hold Smith down if he gives up position and beat him up. I also like Gus' speed and movement to get the better of a guy like Smith, who's just not quite as quick. Doesn't do things quite as well as Gustafsson does, and the speed at which he does it just isn't there. Again, I'm a huge Anthony Smith fan. I really enjoy watching him. I remember predicting fights back in Strikeforce, but I feel this is a bad matchup for him. It's a tough fight for him. I'm all the credit in the world for taking it, but my prediction is Alexander Gustafsson to defeat Anthony Smith by TKO. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 153. Hopefully YouTube doesn't pull my video down. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. Again, I'm hoping if YouTube has any issues with my video, they come forward and they let me know what they are, and we can maybe figure it out, and I can point some things out. Maybe they can explain to me what I'm doing this. It's creating the problem. Either way, my prelims available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. The bet pack's available there as well. KO_predictions on Twitter. Follow me on Facebook. You can search us up. Subscribe to me on YouTube. Do all the fun things. Like, click the bell, subscribe, all those things that get you notified when I post content. And as always, thank you very much for tuning in. It's been a great time predicting fights. We get one more after this and another week off, which is kind of abnormal for this time of year. But hey, we'll take it and we'll enjoy it. And this is going to be a fun card nonetheless. Take care, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi.